Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 119 of the In a Nutshell podcast. I'm your host, Sean Vowells. I've got Joe Meade with me, and tonight we are previewing Big Ten basketball. We're going to try and do this all in one video. I know it's a lot, 18 teams, but the season's already started, and we're running out of time between our other conference previews with Mike and our college football stuff, so here we go, all in one video. Try not to bore you too much. All right, Joe, I've got the coaches poll up, this is the media poll, not the coaches poll, and I have Torvik up also. We'll take a look at some rosters. We'll take a look at non-conference schedule. Let's talk about the team that is projected to finish first. 25 of the 28 people who voted in this have them winning. They return three really good players from last year's team, 2 All-Americans. That is Purdue, the Big Ten Player of the Year last year, the preseason Big Ten Player of the Year this year in Braden Smith. Joe, Purdue is projected to win this league, and there's a pretty good reason because they're number 1 overall in the country. But what are your thoughts about Purdue going into this one?
Yeah, I mean, Purdue, I think this is the third or fourth straight year where you come in with sky high expectations. Even last year, even after the loss of Zach Edey going into the 24-25 season, you saw those expectations kind of go higher and higher. Kind of thought they crashed and burned in the month of February, right after they lost that game to Michigan in Chrysler. It seemed like they could never really get going again. Um, definitely were outside that top four last year between, Michigan State, Michigan, Maryland, and Illinois. So kind of want more consistency for the Boilermakers. I think the addition of Oscar Clough, I think you're going to see more developmental pieces too. Daniel Jacobson's another guy off the bench, 7'4", who played on the U.S. 18 team in the World Cup this summer. I'm looking for guys like that to really step up because I think this is a team, Sean, that's going to need some depth. I don't question Fletcher Lawyer. Obviously, I'd be dumb to question t- uh, Braden Smith and TKR, but I don't know. I think it's a lot of pressure again for Purdue, but I do think expectation this year should be to at least hang a banner between Big Ten regular or the Big Ten tournament.
Yep, they've got high expectations. Omer Myers, a point guard that they brought in also from Europe. I don't know if he's going to play the biggest part this year, but he seems to be the heir apparent to Braden Smith. You have Cox, Harris, the role players. You have the top 3. I think it's going to be a good year for them. Non-conference wise, they've already taken care of Evansville. They have Alabama away, Memphis on a neutral. That's a Big Ten game. Iowa State at home, Marquette at home, Auburn on a neutral. This is a pretty good non-conference schedule, which has become sort of the norm here for Matt Painter and the Boilers.
Yeah, and I think we've kind of seen, and we'll talk about this throughout, so let's just call it an inference. A lot of teams are scheduling these harder schedules. We saw the committee last year really look upon you harshly if you didn't get some of these really good wins in the non-con, and I think if you're a team like Purdue, you're going to try to collect as many of those as possible.
Yep. They do have early Big Ten games. These are I believe the only power conference that does these early 2 games off the top of my head. Might be wrong, but before going back to non-con and then back to conference play. But Joe, it's going to be hard to take them out of the number 1 spot until we see otherwise. I think we've got a ton of good teams in this league, and our official power rankings will come out later. But hard to take them out of the number 1 spot for me. The only other team that was voted first in this media poll, Joe, is your Michigan Wolverines. They are actually higher than Purdue and Torvik right now. They're up at 3, an impressive 121-78 win over Oakland to open the game. And Joe, while the consensus seemed to be that Louisville won the transfer portal, a close runner-up seemed to be Michigan. You've brought in Yaxel Lendenborg from UAB, Elliot Cadeau from North Carolina, Adai Mara from UCLA, Morez Johnson from Illinois. You still have Gale Burnett Shetter back, and you also have a pretty a freshman with a ton of potential in Trey McKinney. So Dusty May, year 2, roster's loaded.
Yeah, I think to be honest with you, Purdue definitely has the best starting five, I guess, in this preseason portion of the season. But I think Michigan's depth is far superior to Purdue's. I don't think anyone could really argue that. I think you have proven depth more than anything. I think the fact LJ Case and Will Cheddar, a five-star like Trey McKenney, and one of a Mara or Perez off the bench is simply ridiculous. Those are guys that could be future first-round picks between McKenney and Mara and potentially Perez Johnson. I see him more as a 3, 4 year guy, but regardless, getting back on track here, Sean. This is a team. I think the biggest question is can they go? They could definitely go 8 deep. Can they go 9, 10 deep? And that's when we've seen teams, particularly Michigan State last year, who won the conference by 3 games, have a lot of success. I think 3 point shooting is probably a question on this team, but in terms of actual scoring, I'm very not worried. And Dusty May saw the three weaknesses Michigan had last year, which were turnovers, lack of offensive rebounding slash more possessions, and outright, I think physicality. I think they were pretty soft at times last year. You get a guy like Yaxel Lendeborg, you get a Perez Johnson known for his rebounding acumen, and then you get a guy, and you continue to, maintain even the holdovers from the Jawad era, right? The Namari Burnett's, the Will Cheddars of the world. I think it's a really good thing for Michigan. I do expect them to hover around this top four all season. Uh, for me, Sean, before you get to their non-con, I think the expectation for them should be to hang a banner as well. I think you don't go out and get a roster like this if you're not trying to win championships, whether it's Big Ten regular tournament or getting to Indianapolis for the Final Four this year. I think the team definitely has the makings for that.
I think there's a real upgrade from last year's team that was pretty good. They were just incredibly inconsistent. Um, but yeah, they're right up there with Purdue for me. I think after the second place team, there could be a whole lot of jumbling and moving around, but a pretty hard non-conference too, Joe. Just 4 bye games. They have the return pretend neutral game against Wake Forest. This is the one in Michigan.
Mhm.
This is at LCA.
LCA, yep.
Um, TCU on the road, returning that home game from last year. TCU lost to
New Orleans or
New
someone bad.
Orleans. That's
Yeah.
correct in their first bye game. Should go down there and win. You've got players era as well with San Diego State and Auburn, and then of course another opponent there. Looking, that should be 2 more wins for Michigan. I know we're getting ahead of ourselves here, but also Villanova at home. Kevin Willard. Michigan can run the table here. They can get to the new year undefeated, I think. They got Rutgers and Maryland as their early Big Ten games. I think Michigan is going to do some damage here early on. And while they do have a ton of power conference games, they should win all of these. Or going into each individual game, they should win that game. But yeah, we could see between the top two teams, we could see a pretty good non-conference here from the Big Ten.
Absolutely. And don't forget they have a game against Duke in DC on in February. That's their last, I guess, major non-con game. But we'll obviously get into more of the Big Ten schedules just for the listeners as we progress throughout the season. This is just a high-level preview video. But Sean, is there any disagreement before we move on to the next step? Michigan is definitely trying to hang banners with this roster.
Yeah, no, I think it should be right up there with Purdue. Of course, if you finish second in the Big Ten and you go to the Sweet 16 and you lose in the championship of the Big Ten tournament, there's no banner there, but that's a pretty good season too. So, um, yeah, those two should be double bye teams for the Big Ten tournament, which of course now Joe is going to start on Tuesday this year. All 18 teams will be making it um, to Chicago or Indianapolis this year. Whatever,
Chicago.
Chicago this year. Um, but yeah, that's an interesting wrinkle that we got thrown in the middle of the summer, and don't know if anybody really thought that was necessary. But that means we need to do our tournament preview one day earlier this time around, Joe. But that is months and thousands of games away. All right, third in the poll here is Mick Cronin and UCLA, another big winner from the transfer portal. They get Donovan Dent. According to some reports, one of the most expensive guys out there. They bring back Tyler Bilodeau, Sky Clark, Eric Daly. They get Xavier Booker from Michigan State. They get Trent Perry from Kentucky. And while Game 1 didn't go great for them, they only beat Eastern Washington by 6. There is an expectation out there in Los Angeles that the Bruins can take a step from last year's team.
Yeah, I think I like the returning core a lot. I like, of course, incorporating New Mexico's Donovan Denton there as well. I thought he was probably Richard Petito's best player in his stint in New Mexico and Albuquerque there. I really think that he was probably more one of the most underrated transfer acquisitions because you had like the NC States, Louisville's, and Michigan's pulling, and even Purdue's pulling so many guys in that somewhat got under the radar. One thing I'll say is I think Tyler Bilodeau and Xavier Booker, if this combo could work, we've only seen it in a few exhibitions and in one game now. I think if each of those guys get double digits a night, I think that could be a really scary combo for the conference. I thought UCLA's big play last year left a lot to be desired. Um, I do think that they're going to need some more depth. I think they're only going 6 or 7 deep as we speak, and with Eric Daly, out for a bit, I do think that this is a team that's going to have to develop their freshmen, some of the younger guys, because as we saw last year, Sean, uh, it's a war of attrition in a way in these title races. Wouldn't pick UCLA to win the regular season. I do think they're going to be in store for a lot better season, hopefully a more consistent season. Otherwise, we're going to see more press conference moments with Mick Cronin,
And
which, by the way, don't lack entertainment.
and we may have already had one, Joe, because they've already played a game. They didn't look great. They were in a dogfight with Eastern Washington, who is 2-11 in Torvik, so not like one of these total bye game pushovers, but still like it's not like a Kansas whose schedules. It seems like all of their bye games are within 120 to 150, and if you beat them by 21, that looks good. They look bad against Eastern Washington defensively, giving up 22 of 29 from two. That is not the identity of a Mick Cronin team. He already, basically told them that they suck. One game into this year, defensive rotations, rebounding effort, all of that was, laid out already. But yeah, depth is the key here. They didn't have it yesterday, and they're going to have to develop it. Some teams are certainly better at it than others. But Joe, seeing what we saw yesterday, the lack of depth, I think this team might get sucked into the middle of the pack. And I don't know if that means they're a terrible team or anything, but they're probably the 18th in the 20 to 30 range in the country, the fifth or sixth best team here in the Big Ten. But Dent was a huge get for them, probably the best player outside of the Power Five last year, with the sole exception of your guy, the Axel. But they have enough scores where they should be able to do enough for me. I'll probably have them a few spots lower than third, but still, there's a chance. Protected seed double bye is on the table for the Bruins. All right, Joe, down we go to Illinois here, fourth in the poll, fifth in Torvik, and Brad Underwood seems to have done it again, basically raiding the European market for players last year. He has a couple of returners this time around, Kylan Boswell, Tomislav Ivisic, Ben Humrickhouse. They get Andrei Stojakovic, the son of Peja, from the transfer portal. They get Big Z from Arkansas. They still have Jake Davis. They get Mihailo Petrovic, who is a European professional. David Markovic, who is a European professional. It seems like Brad Underwood did the Europe part, but also has some returning players this time around. And they're definitely going to be one of the most unique teams in all of college basketball. They did beat Jackson State 113 to 55 already. But Joe, what are your thoughts on Brad Underwood and the Fighting Illini?
I think he's trying to construct this roster to go 9 deep. Um, I'm interested to see how this works out. I think he's got a lot of capable scorers on this team. I think last year at times it'd be so frustrating. They'd be a frustrating watch, especially for Illini fans. And we saw it all over here. They would jack a lot of threes. Now, in their opener and their exhibitions, they've been making a lot of threes. But hopefully, this is a team that can also get to the rack at times. Because last year, shot, I think they were the most hot or not team in the conference. You had games where they'd score 100 on you, and you thought this is the best team in the country. Then games they get blown out at home. They made no sense. So I think the consensus this year, Sean, this has to be a more cohesive effort all year.
Yeah.
Whether that's developing chemistry, whether that's staying healthy, which obviously is very hard to do, and probably like finding different ways to score, except because I love Ben Hummerkaus, 5 of 9 last night from three, for example. There's games he'll go 1 of 10, and they have to figure out other alternatives. Last year, I thought they were a little too dependent on the freshmen, even though Yakashonis ended up being a first round lottery pick. I think this year they're trying to create more options, more so than having one guy be their sole get out of the funk guy.
I also think they're going to be better at defense this year. They are projected to be in the top 10. But the three pointers is a pretty big thing yesterday, Joe. And I know looking at attempts in some of these games where you're winning by a bunch isn't maybe the best thing, but they took 37 threes against Jackson State. A lot of these times in these bye games, these big, power conference teams will sort of just pound the rock inside and not take as many threes as they would in the Big Ten, where you can't do that. But that's not the case here. They took I think they're going to be in the 30s most times. Obviously a high possession game. It was 76 possessions, which is definitely above average. But we see games in the 80s in terms of possessions. So yeah, 3-pointers are going to be big here, but I think they might be good enough at defense to like have a couple games where they don't shoot it great and still win. That to me is going to be the key to whether they're sort of just another okay team that is capable of greatness or whether they're actually a pretty great team. But I'm going to lean towards the second part of that. I think they're good enough defensively. They have a little bit of a rotation. They have multiple players who can get their own shot. I think Illinois will be significantly better than last year.
I agree. I also think Brad Underwood, or Brad, whatever European connotation you want to put on him, has proven time and time again that he can run this league, and if he's not running, he could be a very annoying factor uh, to the title favorite and title contenders. So I also project Illinois to have a much better record than they did last season. I don't think they'll be the double digits for losses, is my bold prediction.
And a tough non-con for them. Texas Tech at home, Alabama on a neutral, Connecticut on a neutral, Tennessee on a neutral, Missouri bragging rights neutral. Um, yeah, I mean they're going to be tested early. I think they're ready for it. Like, maybe. I guess in the age of the transfer portal, Joe, I think just every team is sort of searching for things early on, and the old in the 5 years ago when you had a bunch of returners, you would just sort of be the whole team all year. I don't think that they're going to start off slow. It doesn't look like it. But yeah, I think expectations are rightfully pretty high for them. All right, let's go out west, Joe, to Oregon. Probably the best returning dynamic duo in the league in Jackson Shellstad and Nate Biddle. They also return Kwame Evans. They get to Tykai Simpkins in there, Sean Stewart from Ohio State, and then Duke before that. But they're a little bit lower here in Torvik compared to the other Big Ten teams at 27. What do you think Dana Altman's got in store here as Oregon heads into year 2 in the Big Ten?
I think they're a dark horse, not necessarily to win the league shot, but I think to supersede expectations, maybe find themselves in the title race late in February. I think Shellstead and Biddle, I agree. I think Purdue's trio is rightfully getting a lot of love between Moyer, Braden Smith and TKR. But I think Nate Biddle, as last year, Jackson Shellstad, who played like a senior last year as a sophomore. This is a very scary duo. I think a lot of teams avoided playing in Eugene last year, and they're going to find out this year that place is no joke to play at, like it isn't in football. I think Kwame Evans is kind of one of the keys to this team for me, Sean. Can him or a guy like Sean Stewart really elevate that team? I think we saw it in flashes last year toward January and February with Kwame Evans. I think this year he's going to have an elevated role. I think he'll probably have to average, 12 to 13 to take pressure off Biddle and Shellstad because that's who all the coaches are going to game plan against. Let's call it what it is. Depth wise, I'm not going to pretend to know everything
Yeah.
about this Oregon team. What I will tell you is Dana Altman was very successful in the Pac-12. Now this is his second full year in the conference. I definitely think he'll have some updated game plans and kind of know how to guard um, a league. Let's face it, John, I know there's some newcomers, but continuity wise, there's very few new coaches. I think we only have some at, Minnesota
3, I
and
think.
yeah, Minnesota, Indiana, and Iowa.
I
And Maryland, four. Yeah.
I think another key to that being tough to play in Eugene, Joe, is that Washington is going to be better this year. So the Northwest trip is going to be harder than it was last year. Those games are usually 2 days apart, whether it's Washington first or second. Like that is going to matter. Like teams were able to sort of roll over Washington last year and really focus on Oregon, and they still were pretty good at home. So I think depth is the main key here. I think, with the sole exception of Purdue, I think this is probably the best duo in the conference. Um, and Shellstad and Biddle, they took a little bit to get going last year. Um, they're back in players era again. They've got the same two opponents as Michigan does, Joe, and Auburn and San Diego State. They'll have a third one there, and then they play Gonzaga on a neutral. So not the toughest non-conference schedule. They start out in the Big Ten with the USC at home, UCLA on the road. But yeah, is Oregon even going to be good enough to sort of get out of the middle of the pack here and get a double bye? Or is their depth going to cost them sort of, I think there's going to be a lot of teams with 9, 10, and 11 wins this year. I think Oregon, unfortunately, might get dragged into that.
Yeah, I think they'll be the upper end of like that 5 to 8, where you don't get the double bye. But I'm not going to necessarily hedge all my bets against Dana Altman in year two of this league
All
for
right,
him.
let's go to team number 6, Joe, and that is Tom Izzo and Michigan State, 25th in Torvik. They are 1-0 with a 11-point win over Colgate last night. The roster is very similar to last year. They don't get any transfers. Or Trey Fort is a transfer
Yep.
from Samford. He's a pretty good player, and he was pretty good yesterday. But Jeremy Fears, Cohen Carr, Jackson Kohler. They do have Cam Ward, not the quarterback for the Tennessee Titans, a different Cam Ward, who is a pretty highly sought after freshman. And, Joe, I think it's going to be more of the same for Michigan State. Don't know if that's really a good or a bad thing. They were able to get themselves out of the middle of the pack and into the upper echelon of the conference last year, and they ended up winning by a couple
Three
games.
games. Yeah.
Yeah. So, are you leaning towards that happening again, or Michigan State getting sort of dragged back into the middle?
I wouldn't say back into the middle. I don't think I'm going to pick them to repeat. I don't think that's a bold statement. I don't love the lack of star power here. I think Jeremy Fears is probably their best player. They're going to have to rely on a lot on the development of Cohen Carr, particularly shooting the ball. I don't think him shooting a lot of threes should be their game plan. I think you really have to utilize his athleticism and playmaking ability. Jackson Kohler, I'm a fan of his, but I'm interested to see how they could space the floor with this Kohler Cooper lineup out here. I think they're going to rely a lot on the development of Cam Ward or even a Jesse McCulloch, right? You know, it, can a freshman have the Jace Richardson type jump? Not necessarily to a first round pick, but to someone who's a consistent scoring option and perhaps takes pressure off of Cohen Carr or Jeremy Fears to facilitate the offense. Because Carson Cooper and Kohler, they're mainstays here. They're not going to be guys that are going to necessarily carry the team on their back. Can they find one more guy capable of doing that? That's yet to be seen. One thing I want to say, Sean, I think the loss of Jaden Akins and Richardson's going to hurt them toward the beginning part of this season. I do think they'll figure it out eventually. I mean, most Izzo teams do. Even the one that 2 years ago who consistently underperformed ended up losing in the round of 32. They found their groove eventually. It was in spurts and it probably wasn't the consistent effort fans expected. But this is a guy, even late in his career, Sean, they're going to figure it out eventually. I don't think their records in the Big Ten will be anywhere near as good. I think they were like 17-3 last year in the conference. I bet they'll lose a lot more games than that, but I don't see a huge regression here.
This is as usual with Tom Izzo, a tough non-conference. This weekend they host Arkansas and John Calipari. That'll be a really good game, and I would actually give the edge towards the Razorbacks in that one. They play Kentucky on a neutral, Mark Pope, and that team is loaded. They play North Carolina on a neutral. That team is less loaded than people are saying. I would give Michigan State probably the best chance of winning that one, and then they play Duke on a neutral at home a week or so later than that. So 4 really tough non-conference games, Joe. And before you comment on those, their bye games, they only have one team outside the top 300, and they have 4 bye games against top 175 teams. These things matter when it comes to the tournament, and of course, these teams could stink and not be top 175. But East Carolina, San Jose State, Oakland, and Cornell are all inside that number. Those matter for tournaments. Those are quad 3 games, not quad 4. Kansas has done it over the years. It seems like Tom Izzo and his staff really have scouted out these teams well, where, you see these spreads on here as I'm navigating through Torvik, like Oakland's 15.5, East Carolina 13.3. If you show up and play and beat these teams by 25, these are great for the numbers. And Michigan State has been that team over the years. Even when they underperformed and their record stunk 2 years ago, their metrics were phenomenal and they were easily in the tournament when, had they been 10 spots lower, they might have been on the bubble. But a very, very interesting and strong non-conference schedule here from the Spartans. All right, Joe, let's go to Wisconsin here. They're 7th in the preseason poll, and Greg Gard is back, and he has sort of reinvented their play style here over the years. They're a much more fun team to watch offensively. John Blackwell is back. They have a couple. They bring in Nolan Winter's also back. They bring in Nick Boyd, Austin Rapp, Braden Carrington. This is a Wisconsin team that should be able to score it again. And clearly, with them projected to finish 7th, other people think so too.
Yeah, this could be interesting. John Blackwell being the main facilitator. I think he's a guy who declared for the draft, ended up coming back. This is a guy who could make it to. I think could make anything in the paint. It's gonna be interesting to see whether he facilitates the 3-point shooting. I know last night he certainly did.
6
I don't
for
know.
11, yeah.
See, I don't know though if he could do the Taji and really create those on his own. He'll probably
He probably shouldn't.
no, he definitely shouldn't.
Yeah.
It's nothing against him. It's just not his strong suit. I think they're going to need help from other people around him. That's not necessarily a bold statement. I think riding a guy like Nick Boyd is really interesting. The 5th-year player from obviously FAU and San Diego State. If they can get something going with that guard duo, I think that opens stuff up for Austin Rapp, Nolan Winter, and even guys like Jack Janicki off the bench, who's another returner. It's going to be interesting to see what Greg Gard does with this roster. I don't necessarily know what to make of them, to be honest, Sean. I think this is a team that could finish anywhere from like 3rd to like 10th in this league.
There's
so
a lot
7th
of
is appropriate.
There's a lot of average numbers here in this Torvik sort of thing that I've got up. You obviously can't see it, but the viewers can. And there's 36th in offense, 31st in defense, 37th in field goal percentage, 42nd in turnover percentage, 20% in defensive, or 20th in defensive turnover percentage. It seems like, Joe, that this team is going to be good at everything and great at nothing.
Yeah, and sometimes that's what I've made a lot of the Greg Gard era. I think they've been consistently a very good program. I can't think of when they necessarily had an elite team. I thought last year at times they did.
Yeah, the Johnny Davis team
regressed.
Was probably as close as they got.
Yeah.
And they were a 3 seed and they lost in the round of 32, I believe.
Yeah, either way, Sean, I guess my point is for this Wisconsin team, I think you'll see a consistent effort, but I do think that will include losses to the better opponents. I don't necessarily think they'll be getting Penn Stated at home like they inexplicably did last year on Senior Day. That would be my main takeaway from the Wisconsin team. I think they'll be good, but not necessarily good enough to be in the top 4.
Yeah, a clear step below the top tier. Their non-conference is they got BYU on a neutral. That's going to be one of those teams up at the top. BYU is really good. They've got Providence on a neutral. Also, Providence is pretty good too. I don't know if they're a tournament team, but there's a chance that game gets to quad 1 with Providence just needing to get to 50 there on a neutral. You've got Marquette at home, Villanova on a neutral. So, looks like Wisconsin's taking their trip through the Big East. While there's probably one elite team in there, none of those teams are going to be particularly bad. So a good chance for Wisconsin to enter Big Ten play. in a pretty good spot tournament-wise. All right, Joe, down we go, and we've got our first new coach. Ben McCullum and Iowa come in at 8th in this poll, and notably brings his best player from Drake and Northwest Missouri State before that, Bennett Sturts, over. They fill out the roster with Alvaro Folgueras, Cooper Cook, Brendan Hawson, Tavion Banks. Joe, I just finished recording the ACC preview with Mike, and we talked about how Virginia is going to go from being super slow to up and down with Ryan Odom. We're going to get the opposite here with Ben McCullum. Fran McCaffrey and Iowa were the fastest team in the country. Maybe not number one, but probably in the top 5. And then it's going to be the complete opposite. They might be the slowest team in the country now in terms of tempo. So it's going to take a little bit of getting used to for Iowa fans, for Big Ten fans. But what do you think Iowa's got coming into this year?
This is probably the most fascinating team in the conference to me, Sean, because of that. I also think everyone in the college football search, and we're not going to down this rabbit hole. They're like, who's the next Kurt Cignetti, right? I think Coach McCollum might be the closest thing here. If you look at his
He's
success,
won a lot of games.
yeah, he's won a ton of games, and now he's doing it. Now he's at Iowa, and I know Iowa gets like memed on a lot for their football and like their basketball team play style lately, but Carver Hawkeye Arena, that's a place a lot of teams lose at. And I know you could attribute a lot of that to Fran McCaffrey, and rightly so, but I think that's an underrated environment all college basketball. So to have this new style of play, guys like Bennett Sturts, Brendan Houston on this team, uh, I don't really know what to make of it, Sean.
Yeah.
I think they're gonna beat a lot of teams unexpectedly. Like I think this is a team that will lose Vegas a lot of money per se. That'd be my main takeaway.
Yeah, I don't know if I understand why they're ranked so high, Joe. I think Bennett Sturts is a really unique player, but he might be not figured out, but he might be easier to guard when there's a ton of film on him. They play really slow, and when you do that, you've got to have people make shots at the end of the shot clock. If you can play defense and make threes, like there is a formula for this team to make the tournament, but like there is not much around him. I think there's a chance that Drake's team last year was better than this one this time around. And of course, that Drake team was awesome and probably would have gotten into the tournament without they probably would have gotten an at-large bid, but I really don't know here. I think there could be some, like we've seen some new coaches come in and really do well early on in the Big Ten, and then as, we get to the second half of the year, teams start to play better against them, and maybe they sort of fizzle to the finish, but I don't know, Joe, if this will, like we've never seen anything like this in terms of play style in the Big Ten. They're going to, it's sort of like Michigan football, right? If they're winning by 7, they're going to frustrate you. They're going to take the whole shot clock. They're going to be hard to come back against. But they might be a team, like if there's a 12-0 run, if there's a kill shot, I think that might be enough to beat them.
Yeah.
But bold prediction for me, I think Iowa misses the tournament.
Whoa.
I think they are the worst team of the 3 new coaches.
I will completely disagree with that. I think they get back to the tournament, and I think they upset 3. I bet they're going to beat at least half the teams above them. At least once. That's my crazy prediction.
Non-conference wise, they have Xavier at home. Xavier is going to be down near the bottom of the Big East. Ole Miss on a neutral. Michigan State is a conference game. So is Maryland at Iowa State, the Cyhawk game. And then that's it. Just 3 power conference opponents in the non-conference. But yeah, I'm going to have to see it first before I start to believe in the Hawkeyes. They get started tonight against Robert Morris. May already be going on. But yeah, we're going to have to see with Iowa. I think there's a lot of question marks, and not. I know what Drake did last year was really, really cool, but I think some of it might be a little bit overblown. All right, Joe, let's go up next, and Torvik is not loading for me right now. So let's look at the coaches poll. Coaches poll. Up next in ninth place is Ohio State. Jake Diebler's back for year 3, and he has got his guy Bruce Thornton back, and the rest of their roster, which is loading. What do you think is in store for Ohio State?
I'm pretty high on the Buckeyes, and I know people are going to criticize their defense. Certainly was an issue last year. The guys they have returning are really good. Thornton's the best, I think, one of the best scorers in the conference. He's consistently been that his now his fourth year here. John Mobley Jr., I think he'll be a little more mature as a sophomore. I thought at times last year he'd play really well and kind of have like 5 minute spurts where he just tried to do too much. And frankly, last year I felt like he had to because there wasn't really much of a post presence. And then Devin Royal, I think, is kind of the bail them out guy. I think he'll be a lot of that this year as well. Interested to see how Christoph Tilly, the Santa Clara transfer, does. I know he played well in their exhibitions and in early non-con. Can he be a consistent post presence for them? I think that's something they've missed in the late Chris Holtman era, certainly into the early Jake Diebler era. If they can find some kind of a presence from him, I'm really interested to see that. Gabe Cupps, obviously the former Indiana Hoosier off the bench. Can he provide solid depth along with Amari Bynum, the freshman? I think this is a team that's going to have to develop their depth. We kind of talked about that with, and now I'm blanking, of
Oregon.
course, Oregon. I think it's going to have to be the same here. I think, like Oregon, you have 3 proven commodities, and then you have a few unproven commodities that are going to have to develop into known commodities. And I think whether Ohio State gets back to the tournament, that's not really a question for me. I think they'll win, 19 to 20 games, and that should get them in. It's going to be, can they make the jump from a bubble team to a team that's like comfortably in, like a 6 to an 8 seed, for example. I think the team definitely has the capabilities for that. It's just, can this depth around the big three develop? That's my biggest question. And can they figure out this defensive problem? Because surrendering that many points when you score that many points, I guess it's their play style, but it's getting pretty ridiculous.
Yeah, that game, they beat IUND 118 to 102. That game, I think, is going to be a little bit of a fluke, Joe. There were 86 possessions, and I think anything in this mid to high 70s is a lot. IUND just fully track meets it. They're going to have some wild scores this year, and they did give up 1.18 points per possession here, which isn't obviously great against anybody, let alone a team that's in the 300s. But I don't know if that's going to happen again. Like this, it was such a unique style of play, and they had like 53 free throws, which obviously makes the game longer. But yeah, I think we can, if they'll be back in the 80s and 90s against Purdue Fort Wayne. But outside of the big three, I think there are a few questions, but I do think I cautiously like what they've done here at the forward spot. They have a couple of really different options. Christoph Tilly is a little bit more of like a stretch, moving big. He made 17 threes last year. He shot 61% from the field. He's going to be able to score multiple different ways. And then you get Josh Ajonwana from Baylor, and he is more of your like plodding, like lob threading, block threat big. And I think if they are able to interchange well, that could, like, they're going to do ball screen coverages differently. And, it's not on the level of Donovan Clingan and Sinogo from UConn a couple years ago, but it could be that sort of thing where the team plays completely different when the one's on the floor and versus the other one. And I think that is an interesting dynamic at the 5 for Ohio State. They're 20th in Torvik, and in terms of their non-conference, Joe, they do have a couple of big games. They play Notre Dame at home, Pittsburgh on the road, West Virginia on a neutral, and North Carolina on a neutral in the CBS Sports Classics. So not the strongest non-con, but still a couple of opportunities against power competition. But I can see this going a ton of different ways, Joe. Ohio State's been incredibly inconsistent over the Diebler era, even in the end of Holtman and Diebler. They showed that they were a pretty good team at times. and then at other times they really get cold. I think there's a way that this season doesn't go well and Diebler's out of there, or um, 6 seed, like you said. This is probably the biggest range of outcomes of a team that I see in the league. Um,
Yeah, yeah, I could see any situation like from missing the tournament to being close to a protected seed. Not even
yeah,
kidding. I think they have
I
the
think
scoring capability for it.
I think 14th in the conference to a 5 seed is the range. Um,
Yeah, ultimately, I bet it's the middle ground. I bet they're probably like 8, 9 in the conference, and I bet they get back to the NCAA tournament after 3 years. Because otherwise, Coach Diebler is probably gonna find himself out of a job, and Ross Bjork is gonna have to go on a big coaching search. We thought he'd have to do that with football at times, just saying jokingly, of course. But basketball certainly might be the one. Should they not make the tournament? But I really don't see that happening.
all right, Joe, let's get into 10th place, and we've got new coach number 2. Darren DeVries and the Indiana Hoosiers come in at 40th in the Intorvik, 10th in the poll here. And Joe, 0 returning minutes for the Hoosiers. They have a duo of Lamar Wilkerson and Tucker DeVries. They have a couple of other role players: Enright, Connor Way, Dorn at the guard position, and then Trent Sisley, Sam Alexis, and Reed Bailey at the forward spots. But um, we have seen Indiana in a high profile exhibition. They took down Baylor in Indianapolis despite shooting really poorly from three. Um, like Ohio State here, I think there's a wide range of expectations, but what do you think's going into this year for the Hoosiers?
I think the expectation, and correct me if I'm wrong, Sean, this is a team that has to return to the NCAA tournament. It's
Yep.
also, yeah, it'll be going on 3 years if they don't make it this year. So that's simply less than acceptable. In Bloomington, I will say, I don't know how this will all gel throughout the season. I don't question the individual acumen of all those guys, nor do I do that for Coach DeVries. It's just he's not been at places long enough for me to like go off anything, and now this whole transfer portal era that gets blown up, even if that's the case. So I don't know. There's too many range of outcomes for me to be comfortable just outright saying they'll be back into the tournament. I see though actually not a huge window. I see them either like just being on the bubble, missing it by a nudge like last year, or being it at a 9 seed. Like I don't really see this team popping off into like a top 10, 15 type team. I don't know about you, Sean.
Yeah, I don't know if the consistency is going to be there for that. I think, as wrong as it's going to sound, I think their inconsistency might be a good thing. I think they can beat almost anybody. Their style of offense is very fun to watch. It's like night and day compared to 1980s NBA basketball, which is what we saw the last couple of years. But they, in the two exhibitions against Marion and Baylor, the offense looked, they get open shots and they put up a lot of them. And if they make them, I think they can beat anybody in this conference. And if they miss them, I think they can lose to anybody in this league. Size is an obvious issue. I think Sam Alexis and Trent Sisley, who were not projected to be starters, have looked like really good in these exhibitions. They were able to out rebound Baylor in that game. So if they're able to, look, it's going to be a weakness. There are going to be games where we see the other team plus 20 in rebounding, but I think with how good this team can be, I think it's hard to see them like being terrible. But on the other hand, I think they can probably lose to anybody. They'll probably lose a game that they shouldn't, and it's going to come down to whether they get 9 or 10 Big Ten wins and they're a 7 or 8 seed, or they are 18 and 14 on the year and going to the crown. But they have some interesting pieces. They have some good players. They have zero Big Ten experience and just one player who's played power conference basketball, which is a little bit alarming. But Wilkerson has scored it. Uh, you know, Sisley was a high 4-star recruit. You have Alexis, who technically has a national championship ring. You have Connerway and Enright, who are facilitators. You could see the map that Coach DeVries was trying to build, and I think there's a chance that this team is like the 23rd best team in the country or the 53rd. But yeah, I don't know if the range of outcomes is that wide because I think they're just going to be really up and down. But all right, down we go to 11th in the coaches poll, and that is going to be Washington. Danny Sprinkle starts year two for himself and for Washington in the Big Ten. And Joe, they've seemed to, they could be easily renamed the Washington Trojans. They get Desmond Claude and Wesley Yates from USC. They get Diallo, Kepnang back. They do get Ognisevich in as a transfer, but he's going to be out for a significant amount of time. They're thinking conference play. They get Bryson Tucker from Indiana, Lathan Somerville from Rutgers, and sort of the most under the radar freshman who's already made an impact is Hans Steinbach. But um, Danny Sprinkle was a great coach at Utah State, and I think last year, with the roster, unfortunately, that he was able to put together, I don't think it was fair to expect more. But this time around, it's different. What do you think about Washington?
Yeah, I think they'll definitely not be in the basement like they were last season. Scratching and clawing to like get to the Big Ten tournament. Obviously, that's not going to happen this year with anyone. Uh, it's going to be interesting. It's kind of a situation like Indiana, right? You really don't know what to make of it. I trust Danny Sprinkle, and what I like on like Indiana is a lot of these guys have played Big Ten basketball. Lathan Somerville, Bryson Tucker, obviously the two USC guys. Uh, Desmond Claude, Wesley Yates. I think it's a good enough core to get them to the tournament.
Yeah,
I'm going to be period point blank with you. I think they're going to have the advantage like UCLA and USC did at times where teams had to come out west and they caught a few sleeping. I think the road trips this year are going to be even more grueling. I think all four teams got better or are going to be taken as a serious commodity. So, Sean, I'll say this: I bet Washington gets at least 8 conference wins. I think the bar's pretty low. I think if they can win like more than not at home, 6 to 10, you only got to win 2 of your 10 road games. I don't think that's impossible for them, and they're going to play worse teams on the road or get someone sleeping. So I think 8 to 9 wins, barring that any bad losses, gets them into March.
yeah. I think I'm actually pretty high on Washington. They're going to be pretty high in my rankings. My bold prediction is I think they're going to be in the top 25 at the end of the year. They just have too many good players. And I know Claude missed the first game. Don't know if he's out for a while, but like they should be able to rack up some wins here in the non-con. At Baylor, certainly a winnable game, and then home against Utah. But other than that, Joe, they go to Pullman to play Washington State. They should win a lot of non-conference games here, and if they can pick up enough Big Ten wins, they're going to be going to the tournament. They play, they play the LA schools twice, and then quick Oregon twice. So, like, there's some opportunities for some big wins in there, and for a Big Ten record, they don't play Penn State twice. They don't play Rutgers twice. There's an opportunity for like 9-11 or 8-12 to be like a pretty good record here for Washington. But I like what they've got going a lot. All right, Joe, let's go down to L.A. for the second time. We're going to go to Eric Musselman and USC. 26th in Torvik. They took down Cal Poly by 30 to start their year. An interesting roster here. They were in, obviously losing their two best players, but bringing in two that were sort of on the same level as the two that they lost in terms of interest in the transfer portal. They bring in Rodney Rice from Maryland and Chad Baker Mazzara from Auburn. Terrence Williams is still there. Elijah Arenas, Agent Zero's son, he's going to be out for the year with the ACL. But they still have Ezra Ausar, Jacob Kofi. Like, there is a little bit of a core here that should be able to improve from last year.
Yeah, this is kind of like I call it the college hockey team. You have 5th to 6th year guys here. And for those who don't watch college hockey, that's the model that wins titles. Now, I am in no way saying USC will come close to that. What I will say is this is a team that's probably going to play pretty consistent throughout the year. Now, does that mean they're going to have a really good record? I don't think so. But with the amount of experienced guys and just intellectually basketball IQ wise, this is going to be a very good team for Coach Busselman to coach. He's really good at putting pieces together. I know he's gonna get accused of, bailing out of Arkansas, kind of falling flat on his face toward the end of last year at USC. I will say USC was close in a lot of games with the Purdues, with the Michigans, and they beat Michigan State last year. So even in a down year per se, this is a team that competes in every game. I expect them to do the same this year, and I also expect kind of like to Data Altman and with Coach Sprinkle, he's going to acclimate to the conference as well. I think he kind of knows, having a guy like Chad Baker Mazara, Terrence Williams on your roster, Rodney Rice. These are guys that have played in plenty of big games in their careers. I don't think there's going to be any game they're going to necessarily not belong on the court for, which happened at times last year,
Yeah.
in spite of their competitiveness in a lot of games. So I expect this team to probably be on the bubble most of the year. Last year, they certainly were not that. Um, I think this is a bubble team that goes into uh, probably goes into the last weekend. You know, probably watching the Lenardi show every weekend. To be honest.
Yeah, this is my line for the tournament here. I think every team above it, with the exception of Iowa, is in. Every team below it is out. And this is going to be the swing team. They don't have a great non conference. They play Boise State on a neutral. I believe that's part of an MT. Boise State did lose a Division II game, which is a whole nother conversation and how that might actually not count. They go on the road to San Diego, not San Diego State, not UC San Diego. Both of those teams were awesome last year. They go to on the road to San Diego, the Toreros, formerly coached by Steve Lavin. But yeah, this non-conference schedule doesn't really do it for me. I think they could have tried a little bit harder. Um, you know,
And that might cost them come tourney time, Sean.
yeah. So if this MT with Boise, they get another big game there, and Washington State, they have 2.5 power conference games in the non-conference. Like that might cost them a spot in the tournament, and
Yeah.
they do get to play UCLA twice, so you get a chance there. They get to play Washington twice. No, they don't. Yes, they do. Washington and Oregon twice. So there's a chance there to do something. But yeah, I might actually change my mind on them making the tournament after seeing this schedule up close, Joe. But unfortunately, I think they come up short. Bold prediction. First team
I bet
out.
I agree. Oh, yeah, you stole my thunder. I was gonna say I bet they're like on the first four, next four out, in the late projections, on that third Sunday, I believe. I think it'll be like close to St. Patrick's Day, like this selection study, like it always is. So on that St. Patrick's Day Sunday, I bet they're one of the like fourth or fifth team out.
All right, Joe. We've got actually our fourth new coach. Forgot about this one. Not a fired. This was not a fired opening, but it's Buzz Williams at Maryland. Kevin Willard goes to Nova. Buzz comes from College Station. They're 42nd and Torvik 13th in this poll. They bring in a ton of transfers. David Coit from Kansas, Solomon Washington, and Pharrell Payne from A&M, Miles Rice from IU, Darius Adams, highly sought after freshman. Um, this was pretty late in the cycle, all things considered. We talked about Willard affecting a Big Ten job, or Willard leaving for a while. It happened. Buzz sort of had to put this team together with who was left in the portal, some of his former players, but I think year one, I don't think it'll be like Washington level of wash, but I think the better days are in the future for Maryland. They might struggle this year. Yeah.
Contender like a Michigan or even like a Wisconsin napping, I think you're the perfect upset candidate for it. Pharrell Payne is one of the most frustrating players to play against, I will
Yeah.
say. He's a guy that rebounds very well and affects shots in a big way. So I think this is going to be an annoying team. I think this will be the most annoying team to play against in the conference with the home environment. Coach Williams, obviously, his guys are famous for playing hard for that guy. So I don't think it'll be an effort thing. I think at this point, like Shaw was saying, it's a talent thing, which will hold Maryland back for this season.
And he is coming off a season where he probably had the most talented player that he's ever coached in Wade Taylor the fourth, and he bailed them out of a lot of situations. And it took, like, he had a couple Wade Taylor teams that weren't even all that good. So I think next year we really start to grade Maryland. But they rebound a ton of their misses. Usually there's a lot of misses because in the SEC, there wasn't the level of physicality, and they would they had a couple games with like 20 offensive rebounds. They got 34% of their misses in their opening win against Coppin State. But yeah, Joe, I don't know if there's enough here to I think if there's a coach that's good enough to drag like a mediocre group of players to like a 9 seed, it's Buzz Williams. But I think I think a couple players have missed this first game, Miles Rice included, with injuries. I just don't know if there's enough there to get them to where he probably will in the future. And I think we may have said this before, Joe, but if there was a coach outside the Big Ten who exemplified Big Ten basketball in the Hunter Dickinson and Zach Edey era, it was Buzz Williams. Like, they are like coming for your throats when the ball goes up, and they're going to get a lot of them. It's not going to be particularly fun to watch or play against, but they might be able to just punk enough teams, but I don't know. That hasn't really worked in this league, in this era that we're talking about here.
Yeah, and they'll definitely punk a few, Sean.
Well, it not that it won't work, but everyone else will be able to do it too, not to this extent, but
yeah,
I think could be a little bit of a tough year for Maryland. All right, Joe, we're up next. Nebraska, as we get into our last few teams. 44th in Torvik, as Fred Hoiberg is another year. Rink Mast, Connor Essegian back. They get Price Sanford from Iowa. Burke Hoiberg also back. Jamarcus Lawrence, I believe he transferred out and has transferred back. Yep, he went to Rhode Island for a year, came back. They did smoke BYU in an exhibition, which was a little bit of an alarm. Well, not an alarm, but maybe we should notice Nebraska. But what do you think the Huskers have got in store for this year?
Yeah, this is another difficult team. I actually like their depth. I think they could play 8 to 9 guys. I do like that. I just don't know, if they have the star like they did last year. Why am I blanking? Cam Williams.
Bryce Williams.
Bryce Williams. Sorry. Apologies to Bryce Williams. You know, I think he bailed them out of a lot of situations. I think Coach Hoiberg constructed the roster where hopefully that shouldn't have to happen too much this year. To be honest, Sean, I don't really see much on this roster, nor is there anything with Coach Hoiberg's tenure there to make me believe they're gonna surge into the tourney. I think they could be on the bubble a lot of the year. It's going to come down to Coach Hoiberg. I think he's a heck of a coach. He loses too many stupid games. Nebraska's been notorious for that. Can they avoid the stupid early season or mid December letdown to a really poor team? I think that's really hinged them in the past from the tournament. So if they could find ways to do that, I think they give themselves a serious, I don't want to say advantage, but I think they give themselves some runway to pull off some upsets and then really start talking come mid-January about where this team could go.
Yeah, to me, I Mast was out last year with an injury, so we're talking about 2 years ago for him. But they didn't make the tournament with Bryce Williams, and you took away their best player, and you replaced him with Price Sanford. Price Sanford's a good player, but that's a significant downgrade. So I think this team is crown bound again, Joe. And they performed pretty well in that tournament, and almost won it. Did win it. Final Four.
Yeah, they won the crown.
They won the crown. So, so I think that's probably what they're going to be again. They've got Oklahoma on a neutral. Oklahoma's not so great. Maybe a chance to win there. They've got Lobos on a neutral. Creighton at home. They've actually had some pretty good success in that series, but a couple of the 300 teams in here. They look good against West Georgia, but I don't know if there's, I think the year that they made the tournament, they won at Creighton. And then last year they also won at Creighton, which sort of gave them a shot. But, yeah, I think they're probably 2 or 3 games close here in that Maryland range of – 6-14, 7-13 in the conference. All right, Joe, we got four more teams here. Northwestern, 15th. Not a whole lot of different teams. Not a whole lot of different players here for Chris Collins. Brooks Barnheiser leaves. Jalen Leach leaves, but they still have Martinelli, Mullins, Wyndham. But after that, there isn't much. I think it's going to be a pretty similar year to the last few that we've seen up there in Evanston, and this league is in a pretty good spot. I don't know if they have what it takes to crawl into the middle.
Yeah, barring a pop-off year from like an Appleton Page, for example, I don't foresee anything different. You're right, Sean. I really wish this was the case because I really like Northwestern basketball, and I think the Big Ten's really fun when Northwestern's competing for the tournament or solidly in there. Uh, it's going to have to rely on something unforeseen here, Sean. I think the roster is a typical Northwestern roster, and I think had it been 2021, 20, even 2023 prior to all these teams joining, I could talk myself into the possibility of them making the tournament. I think there's a lack of scoring here I'm just not a fan of, and I
Yeah,
think that's something Chris Collins teams have done really well in the past, and this is one that kind of seems like a bridge year to me. Um, I will not praise many coaches much more than Chris Collins. I thought he'd be the perfect fit for some, I guess, better jobs than Northwestern, like a Villanova, for an example. But clearly very happy at Northwestern. I think they're happy to have him as well. I just don't think this will be a year that'll be talked about much in Evanston for years to come.
yeah, without a question, the hardest job in the Big Ten. Um, I think with revenue sharing, there's a chance that might not be the case, but yeah, I mean they've had some like Northwestern legends over the past couple of years, whether it's Boo Buie, Chase Audige, Brooks Barnheiser, and like only a few of those teams even made the tournament. So Martinelli's a great player, probably first team all league for me. But yeah, I think they're probably two or three like solid players short. Joe, they've over the years they haven't scored a lot of points, but they've been fairly efficient in low possession games. This year they're projected 105 in offensive efficiency, and even against Mercyhurst, who's brand new to Division One, in their opening game, they still managed just 1.03 points per possession. They weren't shooting a lot of threes. I think there's. I don't know if this. I don't think this team's the worst. I think they'll win 5 or so games in the league, but just a tough. It's going to be tough for them. At DePaul, Virginia on a neutral, Oklahoma State on a neutral, Butler on a neutral. Not a super hard non-conference, but that's kind of been par for the course for Northwestern in the past few years. All right, Joe, we've got 3 teams left. 16th in the poll here is our last new coach, and that is going to be Nico Medved and Minnesota. The Ben Johnson era has come to an end, and looking at this roster, Joe, I think I've heard of one of these players before. I think Jalen Crocker Johnson was at UCF. Nope, Colorado State. So maybe not. But Medved has done pretty great things at Colorado State over the years with, even if you go back to the David Roddy teams and the player last year whose name was blanking, who was an All-American. But he had some really good teams at Colorado State. What do you think he can expect here at Minnesota?
I think long term he will be successful. He's from the state of Minnesota. I think he can navigate that high school recruiting world and some kind of a pipeline there in the high school sphere. I think they don't right now have the capabilities to attract major prospects in the portal quite yet. I think this year is going to be a style year. Can they develop a guy like a Cade Tyson, for an example, into something where maybe another guy goes there a year later? I think that's really what you look into. I mean, I know culture now is kind of a BS word in the transfer portal world, but can he establish some semblance of play style or play there and make Minnesota basketball exciting? Because let's face it, since 2019, Minnesota basketball has largely been irrelevant. I don't think they haven't been to the tournament in now 7 years, Sean. Um, I think it's going to be a long-term 2 to 3 year window before Medved gets them back to that spot. I think this year is probably ground zero, and then we expect more in years 2 and 3.
Yep, I think it's Washington last year. It's a pretty good example here. I mean, he's got a few good players. He has a ton of made threes on his team. He has two players who have made 83s in a season before. Cade Tyson has looked great in their exhibitions and in their opening win. But yeah, I think it's going to be really tough, Joe, and I think that we'll start to properly grade them next year. All right, we've got two teams left, Joe, and scrolling down here, and I think these two are a pretty big step below Minnesota. In 17th, we have got Steve Peichel and Rutgers. Let me get over to their page here. The experiment of getting amazing freshmen didn't work so well. Their Ace Bailey and Dylan Harper, two top 5 picks in the NBA draft. They were not a good team. Their defense took a step back, and they sort of lost some of their veteran 4-year guys that were great college players. They're 97th in Torvik. This and the roster that they were able to put together is a significant downgrade from previous years. Going to be a tough one out there at the Jersey Mike's Arena.
Yeah, I think this is going to be rebuild part two for Rutgers, and part one was obviously what Peichel developed that into 2020. One thing I'll say, Sean, is I mean, I couldn't even tell you. I think you're
Yeah.
going to have to establish that defensive identity again. I don't think this is a playmaking roster per se. I think it's going to have to be a team-based roster, which Peichel's had success with in the past. I'm not gonna tear him apart because of 2 bad seasons. But yeah, this is a guy that's gonna have to turn the tide. I think this is a long-term battle he's been in, and I think this is the year he's gonna have to show some signs of turning the tide because right now it does not look very good.
And they get Heron Zerno, who's an Indiana commit. He's a professional. Um, they have Jamichael Davis, Dylan Grant, Darren Buchanan, like a couple of okay players, but I think they need to get that defensive identity back, like you said, and go back to like making their home arena like a awful place to go. Like play great defense there, pick off a game that you're not supposed to at home, and Jersey Mike's Arena might be a couple of those years it was the best home court in the league. You had some okay Rutgers teams winning every game there, and I don't know if that's going to happen this year. They do have 5 pretty easy games to start things off, but they do go to Players Era also, Joe, where they'll play Tennessee, Notre Dame, and someone else, and then to start Big Ten play, they get Purdue at home, Michigan away. So harder, not possible to be harder than that. They also play Seton Hall on the road in the Garden State game. But yeah, I think unfortunately for Rutgers, really anything more than 2 or 3 wins is going to be a significant surprise in the league. That is.
Yeah.
All right, Joe, we've got the team in last now, Penn State, that got absolutely dominated for 38 minutes by my Fairfield Stags yesterday. There was a game that Penn State was outplayed for the entirety. They were out-rebounded by a MAC team without much height, and they made a couple threes down the stretch, and they were able to steal it. But Mike Rhodes, believe this is year 3 for him. Year 3. So,
Year three. Yep.
They've obviously have quite a bit going on over in the football team there at Penn State. But, Joe, in terms of rosters, Caden Mingo's a pretty solid freshman. Eli Rice is a good 3-point shooter. They have a couple of Ivan Juric, a big European big guy who is good, but Penn State looks like they're going to be rooted to the bottom of this league.
Yeah, I agree, sadly, Sean. And to be honest with you, I don't really know what that athletic department and Pat Kraft should really expect. Like, I'll be pretty ticked off if Coach Rhodes has a repeat of last year, 16 wins. He's had 16 wins in both seasons, which at Penn State, let's face it, Micah Shrewsbury is the outlier there. It took Pat Chambers a while to get that thing somewhat going before, ultimately he gets fired. Shrewsbury kind of had lightning in a bottle there,
Yeah,
not to
it was like
criticize him.
one stretch of 1 year. Like they were a bubble team until they did that.
Yeah. So, if they're gonna go on this like tirade of just firing coaches, which I think Pat Kraft, different video, but I think Pat Kraft did a terrible job there. Um, if you have the Pagula family and lobbying people put all your money towards hockey, this is the result where your basketball program can't even get off the ground. I think this is the direct result of that. So I don't blame Coach Rhodes. I don't blame the players. I just think they're gonna have to figure something out to get some juice into that arena because it's never been there,
No.
Sean. It was there for 1 year, and it was a cameo in a Marvel movie. It
Yeah.
wasn't anything substantive.
It was back in the day before the transfer portal when a bunch of their good players happened to like play together for 3 years and they were all seniors and Lamar Stevens was an All-American and like they were what? Or that was the COVID year. We didn't know what seed
Yeah,
they were, but
exactly.
5 or 6 seed probably. But yeah, they looked really alarming yesterday, and obviously I, you know, was on the other side of a rooting interest, but yeah, they got outplayed for most of the game by a team in the 300s. So yeah, I would have cause for caution for them in some of these bye games. They play a road game against new Division 1 team New Haven. They play Navy at home, LaSalle, Harvard, Providence. Like all of those teams are better than 321 Fairfield, and they start off with a trip to Assembly Hall. Then they host Michigan State. They play Pittsburgh on a neutral. Like there's a chance their easiest game may have already happened, and they were losing for the entirety of it. But yeah, they didn't shoot it well. They didn't rebound well. They missed free throws. Yeah, I think that this game here, Joe, on either February 18th or March 8th against the Rutgers Scarlet Knights, that is going to decide who's last in this league. And on the other note, we mentioned it earlier, Tuesday, we talk about Wednesday teams in the Big Ten over the years. Welcome to Tuesday, fellas. Rutgers and Penn State round 3, potentially. That is going to be watched by tens of people. All right, that's all we have for you today. Thanks for hanging in there. 18-team marathon here, just over an hour and 10 minutes. It's as fast as we could possibly go. Each team probably deserves like a half an hour, but let's wait until we start seeing some games. So thank you, everybody, for tuning in, and we'll see you next time.